Hello and welcome to a new video from Byte Analytics, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can create a dimming effect within your Power BI reports to take your user experience to another level. Let's get straight into it. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to talk about the dimming effect. This is something I've seen on reports a long time ago, and for me, this was something which really created the wow factor as a user because it really brings your reports to life. It's something which makes them feel more alive, more dynamic, and more interactive. And particularly when working with slices, because as we know, there's only limited space available on the canvas, and sometimes you may have visuals which take up the entire canvas space, and we all like to use slicers. But slicers can be positioned and used in different ways as well. Some people like to have a slicer pop-up, which comes out on the left-hand side. We've seen that done many times. And there's different types of slicers as well. So in my case, we're using a date slicer, and a date slicer is really, really popular, particularly when working with finance data, because it allows finance people to drill down from a year, quarter, month, even day level if necessary. So in this video, let's quickly show you how we can create a date slicer using the timeline visual and how we can use the dimming effect to make it more dynamic, really. Okay, so I'm going to use the existing button here. I'm going to copy that, but we are going to create the dimming effect from scratch. So first thing I want to do here is go over to the button, Control C, Control V, and I've created myself a new button. Okay, the next thing I want to do here is create a timeline visual. And if you don't have it already, this is in the custom visuals area. If you go in there and search for timeline, you should see this visual there. I've already done that, so it's been added to my visualization section. So let's click on that there. And I'm going to add to it my date attribute from the dim date table. So in this case, it is the full date alternate key. And as you can see, as soon as I do that, it adds the actual periods such as years, quarters, months, weeks even, and days to the timeline visual. Now, our objective is to create this in a dynamic way so that when it pops up, the rest of the screen dims out in the background, and this really is important for the user. So the first thing I want to do here is just a little bit of customization. I want to make my timeline visual have a background, and the background is going to be black, and I think that just makes it stand out a little bit better. Great. The next thing I want to do is create a shape on the canvas itself, and this shape is what's going to create the dimming effect for us. So let's go over to the Insert menu, under Shapes, and Insert Rectangle. By default, I get a blue rectangle, and that might be dictated by the theme that you're looking at currently. And I'm going to stretch this out up to here. And what I like to do actually is just for the moment, keep the visual just beneath the buttons. And the reason for that is it allows me access to the button whilst I'm still developing this feature. And what I'm going to do next is open up the selections pane and the bookmarks pane because we're going to be using that. So the important thing to do here is I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call it dim background. And it's important to name your objects, particularly if you're using them in any kind of functionality, so you can distinguish between them, and it makes identifying them so much more easier. And as you can see, in terms of layer order, my full date alternate key, or my timeline slicer, which is this one here, let's just rename that as well to timeline slicer. That's currently sitting underneath the dim background. But I don't want that. I want my timeline slicer to go on top of that. So let's just drag that above the background. There we go. That looks good to me. And let's bring our timeline slicer approximately in the middle. At this point, it doesn't really need to be perfect, but that's fine. That's reasonably perfect. You can make the pixel perfection towards the end. Okay, great. Now let's highlight our background, which is the dim background, and I'm going to go to the background color, and for the moment, I believe it has a fill color applied to it. Yes, it does. So I'm going to turn the fill effect off. And actually, you can probably do this in both ways, probably through the fill as well, but I'm going to use the background on this, and I'm going to make that background a dark black. At the same time, I'm going to reduce the transparency, and as I do that, you'll see that the background is now letting through my visuals which are on the canvas behind the shape itself. So let's just reduce that down to there, and we can do that slightly more if needed. Perfect. So let's minimize this for the moment, and there we go. We can now see our background, which is dimmed out, and our timeline slicer is sitting on top of that background. Now what I need to do is create two bookmarks. I'm going to do add and add twice within the bookmarks pane. And the first one, I'm going to rename this to show timeline. And the next one, I'm going to rename this to hide timeline. Perfect. Now, the other thing I want to do, just for the ease of working with these two objects, is if I select my timeline slicer here, as you can see, I'm going to hold down the Control key and also select the dim background. Now you can see both of my visuals are selected, and I want to right-click on these and group them. And by doing that, I've now combined these visuals together so that they can move together and I can work with them a little bit more easily than working with them independently. Okay, so let's make this happen now. So I'm going to select my show timeline bookmark, and I'm also going to ensure that my group 2 is selected. So let's click on there, and you can see the group 2, which is a combination of my timeline and the background, is selected. And whilst I've got that selected, I'm going to go over to the three dots on my bookmark and choose selected visuals. That means I only want this bookmark to work for the selected visuals, in which case we do have just those two objects. And the other thing I'm going to do is untick data. So let's untick that. And the thing to note here, that particular group, group 2, is currently visible. You see the eye here is currently suggesting you can see that. So I'm going to go over to the three dots and choose update. Now let's go over to hide timeline. And with the same visual currently selected, let's repeat the process. So let's click on the three dots, choose selected visuals, click on the three dots again, untick data, and this time we're going to hide this group. So let's just click on the eye icon there, and now our group 2, which is a combination of the timeline and the background, is not visible. Now you may want to just go over, hold Control and click on group 2 again, just so you've got it selected. And now we can see with the green little coloring on the left side of that group 2, it's selected. So let's go over to hide timeline, and now let's click on update. Now this is a little bit of a glitch which I found. I've already made show timeline work, so let's see if it actually works. Usually we have to do this again. I certainly had to do this again. So let's click on show timeline, and it's not actually working, so we need to repeat the process on this one. Let's untick the hide icon so it comes up. Let's select that visual group again, and let's go to show timeline, click on the three dots and update. Perfect. That should now work. So if I click on hide timeline, you can see that visual is now disappearing. And if I click on show timeline, you can see my timeline is now appearing. Okay, let's move on. So the next thing we want to do is click on our date slicer button, the new button which we've created, and let's go to the properties of that. And under the action section, let's expand that, choose the type to be bookmark, which it already is, and let's pick our newly created bookmark, which is show timeline. Perfect. And now that means we can use the button to enable or trigger our bookmark. So let's just test that. If I hide the timeline using the bookmark, let's hold down the control key, click on date slicer. Perfect. And now my visual is appearing. So the last thing we need to do is make sure we can hide our visual and our timeline. So you may have noticed we don't actually have a button on this visual group here. So the thing we need to do, and it actually works better in my opinion, because it means the user can click anywhere, we're actually going to allow the user to click anywhere on the background itself. So what I want you to do is click on the background, expand the group to, and make sure you click on dim background itself. And when you do that, you will notice that the action is now available for that particular visual itself. So what I'm going to do is trigger that to on. In the type, let's pick bookmark. And as the bookmark, I'm going to choose hide timeline. Perfect. And what that means now is I should be able to use my dimming background to actually click on to be able to close that as well. So if I hold down the control key and click on the background itself, now the background disappears just like I wanted it to. So let's now close our bookmark pane. Let's test this out fully. Let's hold down control, click on the button. Perfect, we can see that. And if I click on anywhere in the background, perfect, and now that has disappeared. So last few things that I need to do, let's bring up our visual again, and let's make sure it covers the entire screen. So let's just click on here. Let's take it to the top. Perfect. And now that should be it. So if I click on there we go. It's now disappearing. One more time, let's test that through. Let's hide our selection pane and our format pane and all the other panes so that we get a full view of this. So if I hold down control, and there we go, I'm now going to go over to the years and select 2011. And now you can see in the background, the report is filtering based on our selections. And if I click on any part of the background which is dimmed out, I can actually close that visual. So that's how we can create the dimming effect within Power BI. This is a powerful UX technique within Power BI, and it really brings your report to life and really helps your users feel like they're working with an actual application and not just static visuals. So I hope that's been of use to you, and I'll see you in the next video. If you're looking for a more complete end-to-end and structured approach to learning Power BI, then do consider checking out my course on Power BI on the Udemy platform. This is quite a detailed course which will take you from the fundamentals all the way through to the more advanced concepts of Power BI. In this course, I walk you through the various storage modes, the pros and cons of each, next dimensional modeling and why that is important to making sure your reports are powerful and optimum, visualizations and the different types of visual layers you can apply, the difference in implicit and explicit measures, and a deep dive into the DAX language and its fundamentals, and how you can use it to enhance functionality within your reports. In this course, I give you all the resources you need to work through. That includes 7 downloadable files, 7 articles, and 13 hours of on-demand video. By the end of this course, you will feel much more confident in using Power BI to leverage analytics in your environment. There's a link to the course in the description below, so please go and check it out when you get a chance.